Hi there, my name's Ophelia and I'm an engagement lead for Kooth. If you're watching this recording, then you're probably a parent or carer who is looking for a bit more information about our Kooth service that can help support your young people's well-being and mental health. I'll also be talking about Quell, which is our counterpart adult service that anyone across Greater Manchester can access from ages 26 plus. I'm also going to be touching a little bit just on mental health in general. I'm going to be talking through a couple of practical listening tips and sharing some advice around ways into well-being as well. That will all be contained in the first half of the recording. So if you just want to hear the information about these services available, then feel free to kind of skip ahead to that section. Now I'm just going to share my screen to get my presentation up. So just give me 2 seconds. Okay. So first off, as I mentioned, just a little bit of a definition around what exactly is mental health. Well, this definition comes from Mind, the national mental health charity, saying that mental health is about how we think, feel, and act. And just like with our physical health, everybody has it, and we need to take care of it. And with mental health, this is something that exists on a spectrum. So it's not something that is set or fixed or permanent. It is not a case where you either exist in two camps of someone with good mental health or someone with poor mental health. It's something that we can all go back and forth on depending on what kind of stresses we might have in our life, or sometimes it's just to do with our general mood and how we're feeling. So that can range from good to poor. When we have good mental health, that usually enables us to think more positively, to feel more confident in ourselves, and also to act calmly, especially in stressful situations. Whereas when we have poor mental health, that's when we might find that the ways in which we are thinking, the ways that we're feeling or acting becomes a lot more difficult to cope with. So, for example, with this, for myself, if say I am going somewhere, I have an appointment to get to, and I'm stuck in traffic and I'm running late, I can usually tell as a bit of a litmus test how I'm feeling with my mental health that day, depending on how I respond to it. So if I notice myself getting very angry, very frustrated really quickly, then that kind of indicates to me that I am having a tougher day of my mental health. Whereas on a day when I have better mental health, that's when I can usually respond to those sort of stressful circumstances a lot more calmly. And again, this definition comes from Mind. And I think it is kind of handy just to keep that sort of in our heads, just to think about what exactly is mental health, the way that we all have it. And again, sometimes we can have just those worst periods where we might be struggling. And especially in the instances of your children, knowing what kind of support is out there when you can identify if they are struggling with mental health, that can be really helpful. And that is what I'm kind of going to get into in a little bit. But firstly, as I mentioned, this is something that Coop has provided as a resource, just to share some practical listening tips. If you would like to have a read through these at your own time, then you can go on to promote.kooth.com. That is just our digital resources hub. If you go to the search, type in parent, and then this resource will come up instantly. And again, that's something that you might just want to read through in your own leisure. But just to quickly talk through a couple of these, the kind of suggestions we have here, things like thinking about whether your child feels ready to talk. Because sometimes as a parent or carer, you might feel ready to have that conversation to say something like, look, I can see you're struggling. I can see you're having a hard time. How can I help? That doesn't always mean that if we're ready, that the young person themselves is ready. And one of the best things that we can do is just try to be mindful to look out for certain indicators like someone's body language. If they are completely withdrawing and shutting down from you, then the chances are they might not be ready for that conversation. And sometimes thinking about what are the times when they seem to be in a better mood, when they seem to be in a bit of a better headspace, a better place for their mental health. Those are usually the best times to try and initiate any of those conversations that you want to have. And with that, just kind of choosing your timings wisely, because talking about our well being, our emotions, our mental health, that can be pretty sensitive and pretty difficult to bring up. So, finding a time when you're both calm and relaxed. If you do any shared activities together, sometimes it might be if you are gaming together, you have that kind of relationship. Sometimes, if you watch TV together, it could be during the advert breaks. If you are doing kind of the runs to school, so maybe it could be in the car as you're talking to them. It could even be before bedtime or after tea, just whatever seems to be kind of a good time when you notice that your child is more relaxed and seem to kind of have their guards lowered. And another tip here is just asking them what is it that they need from you. Because again, with difficult conversations, sometimes it can be helpful to ask specifically what kind of things you can do to support them. So it might be a case of asking, do they need some space right now? Or asking, do they need, someone to kind of listen to them and just hear them out? Asking if there's anything that you can do. And sometimes they might not always realize and they might not always be sure about what it is that they can do that help with. So, for example, you could maybe ask them, like, is this what you need from me right now? And then they can either confirm that, or if you're maybe way off course, then they can sort of let you know that. Now, another tip here is just thinking about resetting. Because again, talking about feelings can be very sensitive. So thinking, is a public space best for this? Or is it better to wait for when we're at home? Maybe home isn't always the best place either. So it could be in the car. It could be if you go for a walk together anyway. If you go maybe for a walk to the shops. Just thinking about what is kind of that setting, similar with the timing, where they seem to be a little bit more relaxed. And another tip here is just this idea of maybe naming things. So, especially kind of helping young people to identify and name their feelings. So, if you kind of pick up on their body language right away, then it can be helpful to verbalize that and just maybe say something like, you seem angry today. I can see you've got your hands clenched. I can see you don't have a happy face. I can see you've got your arms crossed. I can see you're hunched over or you're turning away from me a lot. I'm just wondering, is there anything that's made you feel angry or upset? Because one of the things that can be helpful is to encourage that sort of verbalizing and just putting a name or a word to a certain emotion a young person could be experiencing. Now, just a few more quick little tips here. So, also trying to practice asking open questions rather than closed ones. So asking a question like, are you okay? It can give the options of yes or no. And if they decide to say yes, yes, I'm okay, then that can just shut down the conversation straight away and be a bit of a non-starter. When you ask questions more like, how are you feeling? It can just open it up a bit more so they can sort of tell you how it is they're really feeling. And with this, sometimes there's certain questions where you still might not get much response from them. So again, with that example of asking, how are you feeling? Sometimes you might just not get very much. They might just say, I'm fine. And then again, the conversation can kind of end. So if there are certain questions that you're asking and you keep noticing you're not really getting anywhere, you're not really getting much of a response back, it could just be worth considering ways to reframe that question. So maybe instead of asking, how are you feeling, or how has your day been, it could be putting a sort of positive spin of, can you tell me two good things that have happened today? And then if you get a response like, oh, nothing good happened, could be, can you tell me two things that made you feel annoyed today? And giving them that space to kind of share things with you. Another tip here is around this idea of listening carefully. And I know that does sound very straightforward, but I suppose what I will say sometimes, especially as a parent or carer, there can be that tendency to want to jump straight into problem solving mode. You might just want to see, oh, this is something that's happening for you. I want to fix that for you. And while that is definitely an admirable sentiment, equally that can leave someone feeling like they're not really being heard or they're not really being given that space just to feel their feels. And taking a moment, if maybe they have said to you that they're being bullied at school, instead of going straight to, right, I'm going to contact the school, I'm going to contact your teachers, which could maybe even provoke a bit of anxiety. It could be saying, thank you for sharing this with me. I'm so glad that you felt able to come to me about it. I can imagine that must be really hard. How are you dealing with that? And sort of giving them that space to explore and talk about how they're feeling before going on to the solutions that come next. Another suggestion here, especially with younger children, is maybe to make these conversations a bit easier, is to get a bit creative with them. Because again, verbal communication, conversations, it can be tough. It can feel a bit stilted or even a bit awkward. So using things like play, like art materials, drawing, this can be a bit more of a natural language. Again, as I say this, I think that is especially applied towards younger children. Finally, a few more very quick tips here. So taking away the intensity, because I'm sure everyone can appreciate that talking about our mental health, how we're feeling, it is pretty intense. It can feel like a lot. It can get a bit overwhelming pretty quickly. So it can just be thinking before you have that conversation about ways you can perhaps reduce the intensity a little bit. It could be being very conscious of your body language and knowing to yourself that you're not going to lean in too closely. That can sometimes feel a little bit intimidating, to kind of keep that neutral space, neutral body language, and also a neutral tone as well. Because if a young person starts opening up or confiding something, like maybe they are struggling, in fact, a lot of young people at the moment might even turn to some more extreme behaviors, for example, self-harming. And to hear that as a parent or carer, it can be distressing and it can be upsetting to hear that. And you might even reflect that back in your voice if your voice starts to get raised, if you kind of want to reach out to them. I think it's just being aware of our own emotional reactions and seeing that could be stressful or it could be very intense for that young person. They might even regret telling you and think, don't worry about it, and start trying to downplay it or even backtrack from having told you that. So it's very important that if they do ever open up or tell you anything like that, to kind of make that conscious effort to stay neutral, to stay open, to listen carefully, and then give yourself time to process that emotion away from them. So I think young people can be very quick to pick up on adults' kind of body language and their emotional reactions, and they can soak that emotional reaction up. So if it is possible to go away and to have your own space where you can maybe speak to your friends or a partner, or maybe it's someone from the school or whoever your support network is, but kind of save that emotional response from a separate conversation to the one you're having with your child. Finally, the last tip here that I would offer is perhaps about modeling some kind of healthy communication behaviors as yourself. As I talked about earlier, the idea of naming our emotions. With this is kind of naming your own emotions and making talking about our emotions and mental health a bit more normalized. Because if you are having a difficult day yourself, and instead of it kind of cropping up or showing in snapping at someone, or having a short temper, or even withdrawing from other members of your family, if you can try, and I know it does take conscious effort to sort of maintain that certain neutrality, whilst kind of verbalizing what's going on and saying, I feel really frustrated, I've had a difficult day today, or I've been feeling really anxious this week. And when you start to model that behavior of open communication, hopefully with time, with that sort of normalizing there, that is a behavior that, especially if they're younger, you might notice your child starts picking up that as well. And hopefully in the long term, they might feel more comfortable opening up themselves and just kind of openly naming their emotions as they come up. So those are a couple of different practical listening tips. I hope at least one or two out of those will be helpful. And again, if you do want to check these out, go over to promote.kooth.com. Right, and the next section I'm going to be talking about is just a bit more advice around ways into well-being before I start talking about the Kooth and Quell services. So, there are 5 ways into well-being here. Way number 1 is just trying to be kind to our devices, because I think this is probably the first generation ever to have this level of access to technologies and to devices and screens. And with that access, I think a lot more young people are spending a lot of their times on their screens and on their devices. And when that happens, that means that there is an increased risk of exposure to a lot of either negative or toxic kind of content that is available online. Now, whether that might be on their social media, it could be things like sometimes cyberbullying can happening, people posting on Snapchat or TikTok or Instagram. Sometimes it's exposure to the news as well. There was a lot of kind of news stories around COVID that were very anxiety provoking. Sometimes it can be things like world events that have happened that can be very upsetting to read about. And even when you can see things like acts of physical violence in the media, all of this, especially if it is someone who is quite a bit younger, they could be heavily influenced from kind of being consumers of all that media. So one suggestion here is maybe trying to have a screen-free night. And I know that's probably a lot easier said than done to arrange an entire night off. So instead, it might be something much smaller, like a half hour every Sunday evening. And then from that, maybe trying to gradually build it up a little bit more until it becomes a bit of a structured routine, where it could be half an hour every night before bed, that everyone agrees to have their devices off. Or if that's not feasible, just kind of figure out what you think probably will work best. But even if you can try it just once on every occasion, and that becomes a bit more normalized and a bit more acceptable to spend time away from devices and screens. Again, I think it's all about sort of building that up gradually over time. Another idea here is that if there is a lot of negativity and a lot of toxicity out there, then trying to counteract that with something a bit more positive. So it could be encouraging them to follow some, nice, light-hearted accounts. Maybe on Instagram, it could be dog channels, cat channels, body positivity, anything like that. Or if again you want to go to the Kooth website, I'll be talking about it shortly, but we have got a magazine on there with lots of resources, lots of content about how to pick ourselves up, around our self-confidence, self-esteem, our self-worth, all these kind of really positive messages on there. And so what they could do is even go into that magazine and save in a couple of articles that really, it might really hit home for them, and just having them save it to their favorites. So that way you can always go back to that resource and read it again, especially if it's something that they might find helpful. Way into well-being number 2. So this idea of checking in with others, because especially through stressful times, maybe it's exam periods, maybe it's a transition as they're moving from one school to another, that can feel very difficult. And sort of having that open communication back and forth, hopefully that can just make things feel a little bit easier. And so this idea of checking in, firstly, the suggestion around having 50p's worth of kindness. So this idea of sort of getting it as a concept in something that's nice and easy to explain and to understand with young people. I think it was Paloma Faith who came up with this, that if we all donated a few kind gestures a day, let a few more petty things slide, the world would be better. And so it could be encouraging those little acts of kindness, things like offering to make a cup of tea in the morning, or texting a friend who they've not heard from in a while. And again, go back to that idea of the listening tips, sometimes modeling these behaviors that can hopefully help encourage young people. Or if, again, maybe they're younger and a bit more receptive to this idea, maybe even making something like a kindness jar and sort of popping in all these suggestions and they can pull those out. So that's just an idea. But with checking in with others, there is also this idea of wanting to check in with ourselves too, especially during teenage years. I think young people change a lot very quickly. And so this kind of activity of writing a letter to your future self, it can be really valuable for someone to take just a little bit of space and just a moment to reflect on where they are currently, how things are for them, what they are happy with in their lives, what maybe they're struggling with, and what are their hopes and their aims and their dreams for the future. And whether that's thinking about 10 years' time, or even if it's just thinking about the next school year. And if that's something that they are willing to try, yeah, this is an activity that we have on the Kooth website, so they can check it out on there. But if that's something they maybe do want to do, and they tell you about it, they could even, once they finished it, pop that letter into an envelope, you could put it into the back of a drawer, and maybe even give it them back at next year, in 6 months' time, whenever might feel like a good time to kind of do that. Now, way into well-being number 3, this is around the idea of gratitude. And I guess very quickly here, one thing that I'll say gratitude is not, is telling someone you should be grateful. Because when it comes with that should, and it feels like an expectation or an obligation, that can carry a lot of pressure, and it can sometimes lead to someone feeling worse or more guilty than they otherwise would have done. And that's not really what gratitude is about. Instead, it's more about acknowledging that each and every one of us, just as humans, it's been scientifically shown, we all have a negativity bias, where if you have a really good day, but then one bad thing happened, you're far more likely to focus on the one bad thing, and your bias is just to fixate on the negatives and just forget all the good things that have happened. So gratitude is a way to try and combat that, and to try and sort of minimize that negativity bias, so we can focus on all the other more positive things in our lives as well. So suggestion here is maybe creating a gratitude jar. So again, this idea of like creating a jar, and then if this is an activity you want to do with your young person, maybe writing down the things that they identify themselves they feel grateful for. And it can just be the little things here. So if they have got a favorite YouTuber that they really enjoy, maybe there's a Let's Play series that they really like. If they have a favorite game, if they have a favorite breakfast cereal, if they have a pet at home, there's lots of really small things, favorite musician, favorite TV show, that we can experience gratitude to have in our lives. And so they could write all this down, tear it up into little strips of paper, again, pop it into a jar. Can even fill it with positive affirmations as well. So if your young person ever struggles with things like self-worth or self-esteem, some very kind of common thoughts that we can experience are things like, I am not enough, I'm not worth enough, things like that. And so putting affirmations like, I am worthy, I am enough, I am loved, I am liked, I am cared for, all those kind of things. And what they could do at the start of every day is just pull one thing out of this jar, and that can just help to sort of set the day off right, with a little reminder of the kind of positive things that there are, in a contrast to all the negatives that we don't need help reminding, because our brains usually do it for us. And another suggestion here is maybe around using music as a tool to kind of help us connect with our emotions. So music, I think, is something a lot of people feel grateful to have in their lives. Everyone has their own music taste. That's one of the wonderful things about it. And so maybe it's suggesting to a young person to create a couple of playlists for themselves, whether they have access to YouTube or Spotify, whatever it might be. And it could be creating a feel-good playlist, or sometimes just about creating a sad playlist and having that music that helps you to kind of release or express some emotions that might be pent up. There's different kind of playlists that people can come up with, even for when you feel really angry or mad sometimes, and having a death metal or punk playlist, those kind of things. But music is something that we can really tap into to aid our well-being. Now, Wellbeing Way number 4 is just the idea of being kind to our bodies, because physical health and mental health really are very closely linked. So when we could do just the simple things like getting our bodies moving, get some physical activities, that does release endorphins. Those are the feel-good chemicals we have in our brains. So it could be encouraging just a little bit of physical activity. And if your child doesn't like team sports and they don't like the idea of the gym or PE or anything like that, is think about alternative ways to suggest this. So it might be taking them swimming. It could be yoga. If you have a dog, it might be walking the dog. But even sometimes just the simple things like dancing alone in our bedrooms to music, that kind of thing counts. So it could be thinking outside the box around ways to make that sort of physical exercise or activity seem a little bit more appealing. Even if it's things like taking them rollerblading, going rock climbing. I know all this does depend on what people's personal budgets are, but if there's anything that you can find that they're enthusiastic about, definitely be sure to encourage that. And another suggestion here is around creating a coping recipe. So food is something that people can often bond over. If they would be interested and open in the idea of learning how to cook a meal with you. It could be their favorite meal, it could be something healthy, nutritious. Or if you want to think a little outside the box with this one, sometimes it could just be an idea of creating a coping recipe for life. So it could be sit down and writing with them just a list of all the things that they know they can go to whenever they're in a really low place and they need some comfort or cheering up. So if it is, again, a certain song they can listen to, if it's a comfort movie, it could be just like a small list of their friends who are their closest friends that they can turn to at any time. Maybe it's the addresses of their friends' houses. It could be things like what is their favorite drink to have to cheer them up, if it's maybe a hot chocolate, and just kind of writing all those things down. And sometimes in those days when you recognize that they are really struggling, maybe then you could just pull it out and be like, I'm going to check the coping recipe here. Finally, this is the very last one now. So, the fifth way to well-being, the idea of being kind to our minds, because sometimes life can just get very stressful and it can all build up at once, and it really can leave us feeling overwhelmed. And equally, when that happens, we can sometimes be harshest on ourselves too. So we can be very self-critical, especially if it's maybe relating to schoolwork, whether it could be around their grades, if they're not achieving what they wanted, if they feel like maybe they kind of think they're not getting the right support there, whatever it might be, however they might be feeling. Again, it can usually sort of end up with a lot of negative feelings there. So it's very important to kind of emphasize just being a bit kinder to ourselves and sort of maybe even trying to see ourselves through kind eyes. So a few suggestions here, especially if someone is getting very overwhelmed with things, then focusing on the breath and breathing exercises, that can be huge. That can be a real game changer, especially if your child has ever experienced anxiety attacks or panic attacks. This is kind of one of the guaranteed ways to take someone with those very heightened emotions and just bringing them back down to a bit more of a manageable place. There's lots of different breathing exercises out there. On the Kooth website, we have the bubble breathing exercise. There are counting ones where you can breathe in and count to 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, and hold for 4. It could be the square exercise, where as you breathe in, begin to trace a square, as you hold, and as you breathe out, and as you hold. And so again, it's just the idea of tracing the square as you breathe and doing that again 5, 6, maybe 10 times. So they really can be great for just sort of doing a reset and just kind of grounding us back in the moment and getting away from that very heightened emotional state. Finally, this is the last suggestion here, but just around trying to identify a calming space that a young person can retreat to. And it could be really worthwhile doing this as a little bit of a mapping exercise, thinking, do they have any places at home they can go to? Do they find that just going into the bedroom is a place where they seem to feel like that's a safe space for them? Do they have any friends' houses? So again, like which friends might they go to? Is there somewhere in the school? So maybe if they get stressed out a lot at lunchtime, is there a teacher whose classroom they can go and sit in? Or maybe sometimes if they do experience things like high anxiety, just knowing that you can go to the disabled toilets and just taking a beat there to kind of recover and just be totally alone. And sort of, again, if someone's in a heightened state of distress, just to bring that down a bit. It can even be outdoor spaces if there's a favorite walk, if there's a canal nearby, or any just kind of nice walks. Always making sure of those sort of outdoor public spaces, that it is an appropriate time of the day, they're not alone, and that it is a safe space for them. And sometimes it's online spaces as well. So just kind of hopefully having a little bit of an eye in terms of ensuring that they're not on any kind of chat rooms or things like that that might be less safe, even if it's their favorite game. So things like RuneScape, a bit of an old one, or League of Legends, those kind of games as well. And when you have it all sort of mapped out, then you kind of know these are the kind of calming, comforting spaces for my young person to access. So that is kind of it in terms of those ways into well-being. I'm just trying to think now. I will try to do a timestamp, but this is essentially where I'm now just going to be talking about the service offer that is available to your young people and also to yourselves. So firstly, starting with Kooth. What is Kooth? It is a website that young people can go to access support. Now, sorry, the information on this slide is a little bit old there. Let me just go back to my slide, because our support across all of Greater Manchester, across all the boroughs from Oldham to Tameside to Wigan, the availability to access this is for the ages of 10 through to 25, so up to their 26th birthdays. The support is all entirely online. It's also completely anonymous on the website, and it's self-referral based, which means that they don't have to go through the GP, they don't have to have a referral, there's no thresholds that they have to meet. And it also means there's no long waiting or assessment period either. We are also a flagship service. We have won awards for our delivery in the past. Now we won I haven't a post-it note. We won the 2021 UK Business Tech Awards as the Health Tech Pioneer of the Year. And I believe we are also finalists currently as well, for another award, which I have just here on another post-it note, finalists in the Digital Leaders Impact Awards in the category of mental health and well-being. And I think just what those awards show is that there is an increasing recognition for the importance that digital services can kind of provide in terms of offering that support. And we do attract young people with a range of needs from a variety of different backgrounds. So we can have young people with maybe just a bit of low level need, wanting that kind of early help. We can have very vulnerable young people who come to the website. We can have young carers, young people from the care system. We might have LGBTQ young people with additional needs, autism, ADHD. There is just such a wide spectrum of young people who are on Kooth accessing us for all sorts of different reasons. And we do also provide some SEND provision. So again, for any young people with additional needs, learning difficulties, we have got the kind of capacity to help support with that. We meet web accessibility guidelines to a level AA, and we can help in terms of being compatible with screen readers. If the young person consents to it and they want it, we can liaise with any external agencies that are supporting them and ensuring some joined up care. But at the same time, I will mention that the site does rely entirely on text-based interactions. So they do need to have that kind of basic literacy level there. So if they find that reading is something they really struggle with, if they don't have access to a screen reader or anything like that, then it might not be the best suited platform. And also just to mention about Quell. So Quell is something that is being launched across all of Greater Manchester from the 1st of April 2022. We did initially have Quell emerge as a service in 2018 after seeing the impact that we're having with Kooth for young people. We kind of wanted to replicate that service provision with adults. So this is something that has been expanding rapidly. Again, it's a website, not an app, at quell.io. And it is currently one of the only BACP accredited digital services for adults. BACP just meaning the British Association of Counsellors and Psychotherapists. And Quell offers the same model of care as Kooth. So as I'm going to go through the different support features on the Kooth website, these are all basically the same support features on the Quell website as well. The only difference is that it is age appropriate on each of the platforms. So Kooth is age appropriate for young people and Quell is age appropriate for adults. Currently, over 1.5 million adults across the UK have access to Quell, and Quell is available to any adults aged 26 plus, but equally for anyone who is 18 plus, young adults can access the Kooth website, but if they would prefer something that maybe seems a bit more adult facing from the age of 18 plus, they can access Quell as well. And just to talk you very quickly through the registration process, so on both Kooth and Quell, someone does need to sign up to create an account. We ask for a few details, but honestly, it does not take very long at all to sign up with us. So when it asks for where you live, we're not asking for a postcode or anything like that. There are a few different options, so looking at Greater Manchester and different boroughs. For example, if someone is based in Tameside and Glossop, you should be able to find that on a drop-down list of different areas where we are commissioned. And from that, it does just ask for your sub-location within there. So if you're from Stalybridge, if you're from Denton, if you're from Hyde, just pick whichever is closest to you. If, say, you're maybe someone who is living in Oldham, again, you should be able to find that as an option. And whether you are based in Waterhead, if it's Shaw and Crompton, if it's Saddleworth, you just pick whichever one is nearest. And finally, just as another example of one of our boroughs in Greater Manchester, if you're someone living in Wigan, you just scroll right down to the bottom to find the W's. You should see it there. And so whether you're at Shevington, Standish, Lee, those options will all be there, all available. And that is the area information. Just going back here to the other piece of information we ask for, just the year and month someone was born, what best describes someone's gender. There are a few different gender options, and there's a drop-down list of different ethnicities someone can choose from as well. And once you have filled out that information, which really, again, would take a minute, if that, to do, the only thing that's required is to create a username and a password. So whether this is your young person accessing Kooth, or if it's maybe yourself wanting to access Quell, just make sure that if you're at this kind of step in the process, that the username is something that's anonymous. So no real names, no gamer tags, social media handles. Basically, if it's something where you think you could be recognized, we just do not want that to happen. And with the password, we're not going to be collecting anyone's email addresses, again, ensuring that anonymity, but it does mean we can't send password resets. And if you're anything like me, I forget my password all the time. So it could be worth keeping it something fairly simple to remember, or maybe writing it down somewhere that is safe and secure. And that's it in terms of signing up. So again, about a minute, 2 minutes to do, then you're through to all the features we have on there. So firstly, there is the chat available. Now, this is online counselling and wellbeing support. So it is all text-based. If you've ever used WhatsApp, it is a bit like kind of WhatsApp messaging. There are two ways that someone can speak to our team, either through a live chat, or it could just be messaging our team inbox. The team is made up in both Kooth and Quell, two separate teams. As you know, there are different specialties, someone who's trained in adult counselling compared with someone who is trained in children and young people's counselling. But with both of those, they are BACP accredited counsellors, and also we have our emotional wellbeing practitioners as well. So fully qualified, fully trained, all with a minimum of 2 years experience working to support people. Very understanding, very kind, very warm, and also a very important principle for us is to be completely non-judgmental. And also, unless there is some sort of significant safeguarding concern, anything that is said on Kooth or Quell will stay on that platform. Now, with the live chat, someone can have access to a 1 hour chat session once a week. So in order to access that, they'd have to enter into our chat queue. The chat queue, again, for both Kooth and Quell, is 12 to 10 p.m. on weekdays and 6 to 10 p.m. on weekends. It is open every single day of the year. And the first 3 chat sessions that someone might have are assessment based. So it is building a picture of need, what is going on for that person, what kind of support might they be after. By the end of the 3rd session, depending on the level of need, someone's status can either be set as a drop-in, so they simply come and drop into that chat queue as and when they might need the support in the future. Or if there is maybe a higher level of need that's identified, so if someone is maybe struggling a bit more, they have something more complex going on, at that point, they'd be assigned a named counsellor and they'd have access to 6 structured sessions of counselling support. At the end of a 6th session, there would be a review, and depending on how someone is feeling, that may be extended to a further 6 sessions. And just with the messaging in our inbox, as the website is open 24/7, again, both for Kooth and Quell, if someone is maybe struggling with, say, sleep issues, having racing thoughts at nighttime in bed, I think maybe it could be helpful to use that sort of messaging tool, send a message of just everything that's going on in your mind, and then any sort of message we get, we respond to in under 24 hours with a therapeutic response back. And this here is just a little bit of feedback on the Kooth website from young people who have accessed us. I think it is nice to hear the voices of the young people themselves, saying help is out there for me. It's me that needs to take it. My named worker gets through to me like no one else ever has. She's a special kind of person. She never left me, you know. She keeps her word. She always does. She's the best person I've ever had in my life. And this is from someone else, one a bit younger, saying, thank you so much. You've put so much effort and given so much advice in this message. You genuinely helped me so much in the chat today. I haven't felt listened to in a while. I appreciate your help. So this is just kind of hearing how meaningful it can be for young people to get that support. We do have some other features as well. So we have community features on both Kooth and Quell again. There is a magazine filled with lots of resources. As Kooth has been around a lot longer than Quell, again, Kooth has been going since 2001 now. So there is a very active community on there. Hundreds, if not thousands of people up and down the country accessing us every day. So there's loads and loads of articles on there written by young people for young people, sharing their own experiences, sharing advice. This is what got me through a hard time. This is how I managed to revise for my exam results. This is what I did when I was struggling to make friends. You know, there's lots of that kind of things. Everyone is always very friendly. It is a very warm community on there. And absolutely everything that gets submitted to the website, whether it's a comment section, submitting articles or discussion posts, which I'll talk about in a second, it is all pre-moderated first. So unlike other social media platforms where you have to flag something inappropriate to get it taken down, we check it beforehand. So anything abusive, anything trolling, any sort of bullying never sees the light of day. Equally, if someone maybe puts their identifiable details, like, here's my Snapchat handle, go follow me, we would remove details like that from there to protect people's anonymity. And we also set age ratings as well. So what someone younger, like a 10-year-old could see, is very, very different to what a 25-year-old could see on there. And also, if we get someone who might be a bit more vulnerable or a bit more struggling with their mental health, if they post anything like a disclosure of something that has maybe happened, then we can do all the appropriate safeguarding actions behind the scenes, and we may or may not be able to publish something like that with edits, because of course we want them to get peer support from their peers. So let's take the example of self-harm. If someone is struggling with this, we want them to be able to talk about their emotions and their thoughts around it and coping mechanisms as well. But what we don't want on there are anything like methods or descriptions of the acts of harm, nothing that could be upsetting for other people to read. So that's the kind of thing that we check and just make sure it is all fully safe and appropriate on there. Now, with our forums, this is a bit more of an informal space just to kind of pop things on there like questions. They want a bit of advice. Hey, I've been through this. Has anyone else been the same? Whether it's things like crushes that they might have, whether it is struggling with friendships. Sometimes it can be complaining about family members like, oh, my sister did this today. She's so annoying. Little things like that. Or it can sometimes be a space to get support with the bigger things as well. Equally, sometimes people use this as a social space. I used to work as part of the online team before I moved over into engagement. So I know people talk on there about gaming and their favorite animes and their favorite music. So there's kind of a lot of that social element as well. And people do strike up some pretty close friendships on the website. We also have live forums. This is only on Kooth, so everything else we have on Quell as well, like the magazine and the forums. But live forums are currently specific to Kooth. They are like a space for kind of a live web chat with other people on the website. We run these once a week on a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday evening from 7:30 till 9. We do have a member of the team hosting those conversations. It is still moderated. It just gets moderated in live time, which means there might be a 30-second or so delay between submitting something and seeing it published. And they're always on a different topic each week. And those are some really warm, really friendly spaces. We always get some great feedback on those where people say, they felt like it was very inviting. Then we also have a hub of mini activities. So these are kind of well-being themed activities. If you watched the section of the recording earlier where I talked about the ways into well-being, things like writing a letter to your future self, the breathing exercise. There's also things like making your own coping box. If your young person is receptive to trying out these kind of therapeutic activities, they could be very helpful for them. And there is a community aspect in that people are very welcome to just post their honest feedback. So if they say, this didn't help me, I hated it, fair enough, they can say that. But equally, if they maybe want to say, oh, actually, this one really helped me. I was struggling with something for a while, and then doing maybe this breathing exercise sort of helped me to deal with my stress a lot better. And it can be quite reassuring to see other people sharing that feedback. A little bit more feedback here from young people from the website. Someone saying, you guys are way too kind. You've made me smile. Thank you again. On this website, it feels like an online home with people supporting me with anything that's worrying me. And on this website, I can take loads of stuff off my chest, and I'm really grateful. Someone else has said, this was a great first live forum for me. Just feeling the positive energy and how inclusive everybody is. Reading everyone's really interesting replies, I feel much better than I was before I joined. That's a fact. Thank you so much. And finally, this is the last thing that we offer. So there is a range of self-help features, again, on Kooth and the Quell website as well. So there is a journal where people can sort of track their mood. There is an emoji on there, so you kind of choose from a list of different emojis. It's a visual language that appeals to all of us now. And if someone is using their journal fairly regularly, you can start to use it as a mood tracker. So you can see how you've been feeling over the past week or the past month, and you can start to identify certain trends in there. And just being able to track our moods, again, it can be very helpful to even start to recognize if maybe we're struggling and you notice you've been in a low mood for the past 3 weeks in a row. It can be a great way to sort of see the positives of like, oh, actually I've had a few good days in a row now. And for some people, just being able to see that, that's huge. Or if you notice, oh, it seems like every Sunday I seem to be in a bad mood and sort of thinking about that or trying to unpack it. So it can be very helpful to have a mood tracker. And we also have a goal setting tool so people can set goals by themselves that they can work towards, and they can sort of rate it on a progression scale of 1 to 10. But also, as part of our chats with our team, it is a standard practice for us to set goals at the end of every chat session based on whatever was explored in the chat. So if it was something to do with anger management, they explored it, recognize that maybe music is something that helps someone to feel calmer, setting a goal around creating a playlist of calming music and go away and listen to that the next time they recognize themselves getting angry. So this can be a really helpful feature as well. Last little bit of feedback here, just to say, maybe it sounds dramatic saying Kooth changed my life, but it did. It's a chapter of my life that's helped me to become a better person and allowed me to be myself. If you're struggling, please reach out. And finally, if you speak to young people about Kooth, maybe they're going to seem like, oh, I don't want to, I'm not interested. Fair enough. But if you maybe want to kind of recommend that we are on Instagram and on Spotify, we release regular playlists and regular podcasts too, podcasts on different sort of well-being themes. They might just be encouraged to check out those socials, get a bit of a vibe, get a bit of a flavor of what we're about, and then that could kind of encourage them to take that next step to join the website itself. Finally, this is the last point now, but just to let you know that in terms of safeguarding, because it is online and because it's anonymous, safeguarding has to be a core principle of everything that we do as a service. And again, this does apply for both Kooth and Quell. So we do have a safeguarding team. They're the first point of contact for any concerns that are raised, whether that's by staff or by our service users. And we do find that safeguarding online, it's got to be a balance of that skillful engagement, building a relationship of trust, having that robust clinical governance in place. So there's a very clear flow chart of you escalate from your counselors to your senior practitioners, to your kind of clinical team, your safeguarding team, and a safeguarding lead. So we know who to escalate things up to. There is, a lot of protocols and policies around this, and where needed, if we feel like there is a very serious and imminent risk to someone's safety, if we feel that they are at risk of harm, whether it's from themselves or whether it's from others, that is the only time that we would ask for someone's identifiable information. And because we don't even track things like IP addresses, it really is in the hands of that service user if they want to tell us those details or not. So there is very much the agency is with them. Sometimes one might not feel ready to go into the next steps because, the next steps can be scary. It might be calling the police to do a welfare check, be calling social services. It's different on a case-by-case basis. And if they're not ready for that, then they can kind of make that choice. But equally, what we do is we continue being there, continue building that relationship of trust. I do feel that if they are coming onto the website in the first place, speaking with our team, it's a protective factor in itself because it shows they want to get that support. And then hopefully with time, when someone is ready in those kind of instances of extreme risk, they will provide us with their identifiable details, and we would tell them what is going to happen next, and we'll just sort of talk them through every single step of the way. So I hope that kind of helps explain that safeguarding. If you have any questions, now that I've come to the end of the recording, if there's anything you feel like hasn't been answered, please feel free to reach out to parents@kooth.com. I really want this to be a comprehensive overview, but again, if there's anything where you're still wondering, you still have questions, do feel free to reach out to us anytime. And as I said, all this information, it does apply for Kooth for anyone aged 10 to 25. And lastly, remember there is quell.io for anyone aged 18 or 26 plus to access their own personal well-being. I will stop sharing my screen now, but again, I really hope that information has been helpful. I hope this has been an interesting recording. Feel free to play this back at any point for anything that might be interesting to you, and take care. Have a good rest of your day.